won't fight, chasing shadows in the night. Promises made, but I let them fade. Caught in the cycle, I'm feeling betrayed. Round and round, I'm losing ground. Trying to break free, but I can't see. These negative patterns are haunting me. Nights turn to days, I'm losing my way. Thought I found peace, but it's led me astray. Chasing the high, but it only brings pain. The more I run, the less I gain.
Hey everybody, hey, and welcome to another session of Tarka Said Again. And today we have a special guest, and his name is Jabari Jackson. I like to call him a serial entrepreneur. And he's going to talk with us today about a plethora of things because he has a big, major project in the making. And he's going to give us some feedback, but I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. Jackson.
Yeah, no, you got to give them before we jump into that, you got to give them a little bit of history of how we know each other.
Oh, shucks now.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
We go all the way
All the way back.
back.
Yeah,
School. We
yeah,
gonna say school.
yeah,
We just gonna say school.
yeah.
And we share a bestie, Miss
hmm
Natalie. Yes.
yeah. Now, we go back to high school. I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna say it. We go back to high school, and I'm gonna let all your people know. If they don't already know, Tarka, she was one of the prettiest girls in school. So just, if y'all can't tell it already, she was one of the
Well,
it
thank you.
girls. So
Thank you.
you all know it. And when you're in high school, we all have the it girls, and Tarka was one of them, and she was
Thank
a
you.
part of the it girl crew. So absolutely. So that's how far we go back.
Yes, E high. We like to say the real E high because when we be having these Edgewater people and stuff, they think they school is the real E high.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
But yeah, taking it back all the way to school. And hey, here we are in our adult life, and just knowing that you have done some things that were what we considered to be big. And I know before you left to go to your other state, you had a launch party, and you could correct me, but it was called the Rise Magazine launch.
hmm
And that was like, I was younger. We all were younger, but doing
hmm
it at that age, I was like, wow, I was amazed by the event, and it was so well put together. And the guy, he worked for the Orlando Magic, and
hmm
he
hmm
was on the face or the cover of the magazine, and he definitely had a story to tell as well, coming from nothing, and being in the position that he was in. You think you're gonna ever bring the magazine back, or is that
Oh
something you
man, we get
just
a
gonna
lot of demand. We get a lot of demand for that. We do get a lot
really?
of demand for that. So as we're working on the evolution of the company, that we are looking to do that. So absolutely, because that's really the core of part of my purpose. So we'll certainly speak about that. But as you mentioned, serial entrepreneur, born and raised in Orlando, from Old Town. In
Yes.
Atlanta now, but Old Town is home, and graduated from Evans High School. So for everybody that's in Orlando who knows Evans, graduated from Evans. And so when one of the things I did early in my career, I got into real estate very early. I had a mentor. I remember I actually had a job working for the county. I used to work, be a county employee, had a government job, and I was one of the young guys into cars, and so I would buy cars and put rims on them and all of that. And I had this mentor who he said, man, cars and rims and all of that are nice, man, but you need to think about real estate, and
Hmm.
there's something that appreciates in value and not just depreciates. And we wound up meeting up one day, man, and he took me around, and he actually lived in the Pine Hills area where I grew up at, and he took me around, man, and he showed me, maybe 4 properties that he owned, and he was like, I own this house, and he was renting it out, and I own this house, and and I own this house, and they weren't big, huge houses, but just the fact that he had this small portfolio of houses. And he had exposed me to something that I just I just had never even imagined and fathomed. And so at this government job, now I'm kind of shifting and changing my mindset. And so I had a good, decent job, making steady money. Credit wasn't good at all at the time because you young, you mess around, you don't pay attention to credit and all of that. But I came across this house and I was like, man. And I was at the time I was 22, and I was like, man, I thought about what he talked about and reached out to the realtor, and it was a blessing because the people who were selling the house, they were building a house, so they didn't need to move right away. They needed some time, and so the realtor said, hey, they don't need to sell right away, so that gives us some time. And so I'm going to put you with a mortgage broker. They're going to work with you to help get your credit together. You just and also you put some money aside every month in escrow, and that will help you with your down payment. We'll also get you some down payment assistance, and within 4 or 5 months, we were closing, and at the age of 22, I wasn't. It was nothing exceptional about me. It was just somebody had planted a seed in my head,
Yeah.
exposed me to something that I had never been exposed to before, and so at the age of 22, I'm closing on a home. And so that really changed my whole trajectory. And it's so funny because of the down payment assistance and the money I had been putting in escrow, those couple of months, putting 500 here, putting 500 here every month, I actually left out of closing with a check close to $900, right? And so I'm buying a house and leaving out of closing with a check.
Mhm.
Um, and I was like, man, how come more people that look like me don't have their own home? And that was when, I really began to say, okay, I need to make a shift here. So still working my county job, I started working on getting my real estate license. I got my real estate license, and I actually called up the lady who sold me my house, and I said, hey, maybe a year or so later, and I said, hey, I got my real estate license and I'm looking at getting into real estate. And she had me speak to the company that she worked with, and that was my entry into the real estate industry.
Okay. Me just listening and hearing how you had those in your ear, like you say, planting a seed and having that mentor. And for those that may not have a mentor, maybe their circle. Like those are all important things. Having people around you that's
Yeah.
going to speak life, speak positivity, and not looking to say run the streets or do things illegally. And that's important because the world today is definitely
That's
changing, and I
absolutely.
always like to give back or educate some kind of way to the younger generation so they could be steered in the right direction. And it's
Mhm.
our job to basically pour back into
Yeah.
them because somebody did it for us, whether it was just saying something positive, planting that seed, like you said.
Hmm.
It's our turn now to
Yeah.
give back and be the
Absolutely.
planter.
Absolutely. And for anybody who's young listening to this, who is younger, should I say, um, also being open to listening, right? I
Hmm.
was open, this is an older gentleman, and I was open to him, to meeting with him and listening to what he was sharing with me and being open to what he was exposing me to and being open to having a different mindset. And speaking of mentors, when I ultimately got into real estate, tried to go it on my own, and I was working for this Century 21 franchise, and I was really struggling to build my clientele and struggling to build my book of clients. And there was a gentleman who had attended my church. He was older than me. He was attended the church that I had attended, and I called him up and I said, hey man, and I didn't say hey man to him. I gave him respect, but
Yeah.
But Mr. Taylor, gotten into real estate and you've been fairly successful. And I was wondering, I asked him for some pointers and some help, and he gave me some insight. And then he ultimately said, well, if you're interested, you can come work with me. And he worked for a different company, but he said you can come work with me for a little while and work underneath me, and maybe you can learn some things, and I could certainly use your help. And that's the reason I tell this story is because it's very important, because I had a certain split with the company that I was working for, the Century 21 franchise. I had a higher split, but I wasn't making a lot of money because I wasn't doing a lot of deals. And so he offered for me to come work with him, but he wind up offering me less money, less of a split, because I was going to come under him. And so, anytime I closed a deal, I was going to be making less money, closing that deal. So I would be taking a pay cut. And so a lot of people would say, man, hey, I don't want to take less money. No, I'll pass. But without hesitation, when he offered that to me, I said, oh, absolutely. And so I left the company that I worked for, and I went and worked underneath him as a buyer's agent. And I worked for him for 2 years. And let me tell you, that was I learned more in that 2 years than I've learned just, prior to that point about business. He taught me so much about business. And so, sometimes you have to be willing to sacrifice and take that
Yeah.
sacrifice,
Yeah.
right? And I made more money just because I learned lessons, valuable lessons that they can't teach you in books, man. Just the little things that you don't even realize, and that he had decades of experience learning and making mistakes learning. And so yeah, so I can't say enough about the importance of mentorship and guidance and seeking wise counsel. So.
Yes, yes. And speaking of mentorship and wise counsel and power plays and people, that puts me in the mind of Mr. Les Brown. I had
Oh.
the opportunity, yes,
Yeah.
to witness you bringing him into the city and the event that you had at the Dr. Phillips Performing Arts Center. Yes, what was that, on the top floor? Yes, I was in the building.
Yeah, yeah.
But as I, just noticing, like, you were, as you would say, shaking and moving, at a young age, and that was
Mm.
admirable. You had your head on, as you would say. But in thinking of that, bringing Les Brown, what was that like? The purpose, the conversation, because
Oh
he's
man.
always been a powerful speaker to me. You know what I mean? Just listening to him always, and what I witnessed, it was nothing short of that.
Yeah. No, Les is phenomenal. So interesting thing, man. I got introduced to Les by a friend in terms of his just watching his videos and his motivational talks, right? And so when you're trying to do, and you mentioned we're trying to do big things, you're inevitably going to have some failures. It's
Yeah,
just,
yeah.
anytime you're trying to do something significant, you're just going to have failures, and that's just the nature of things. And so you have to constantly program your mind with positivity, right? And Les was just one of those people that I came across, and thank God for YouTube and the guys who created that, so you can listen to the motivational videos and come across that. And so Les was one of those people that I would always listen to his videos and just consume his content. And we had done an event with our company. You mentioned Rise and how we did this. Would do these phenomenal events. We did an event, and it didn't go as planned. It didn't go as well as we'd have liked it to have gone. And I took a real hit after doing this event, and so I was just in a real low place, in a very low place, in the hole, in debt, and just in a very low place mentally. It was around the holiday time. And the funny thing, man, is, I get a phone call from this 720 number, area code 720, which was a, Las Vegas area code. and I didn't answer it. I'm like, who is this calling me from this
Mm-hmm.
area code, and you think it's a telemarketer or something,
Right.
and I wind up listening to the voicemail. They left a voicemail, and so you screening the calls, and I listened to the voicemail. It was Les Brown, and I'm like, what in the world,
Okay.
and somebody had given him my number, and so he happened to be in Orlando, and this just while we're thinking we're failures, and we had this failure and we're all down on ourselves, you don't even realize the impact and things that you're having on people. And so even though I thought the event was a failure, and it didn't go well, just the fact that I had been making all of these other moves, people saw me and admired me, or admired the things that I was aspiring to do. And when
Right.
he
The
was in
word.
town, they were like, oh, well, you need to meet with this guy Jay Jackson. He's trying to do some things in the city. And so I listened to that voicemail, and it was kind of a sign, like, get up, you need to get your behind up. I don't care what you're
Mm-hmm.
going through. And I wound up calling him back, and we had a great conversation, and then he invited me out to his house. And this is one thing I'll say, man. So I have a list, or I create a list of people that I admire, that I would like to meet. And I'm constantly updating the list based on people whose profile raise up that I admire. And
Mm-hmm.
Les Brown was one of those people on that list. And I've met on the list of people, I've met probably 90% of the people that I have on the list.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a blessing in itself. And for me, it's not about entertainers or anything. It's always somebody that has had various different type of impacts. Les Brown was the one person that I met that was everything I thought that he was. Right,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we don't know these people, and so the persona that we have, and when we meet them, is a lot of times it's
Different.
a letdown. They say
Yeah.
don't meet your heroes, because they'll let you down, and so. But Les Brown was one of the few people that I met that everything that he portrayed himself to be, right, he was all of that. And it was amazing. He's always motivational. I mean, his voicemail that he left me was motivational. When I met with him, he was motivation. He was a clown. He was having fun clowning, and with that laugh that he has, that's real. that is
Yeah.
that is who he is, man. And so we've developed a good relationship. And as I was transitioning, or about to transition from Orlando to Atlanta and move the company, I told him, hey man, I'm looking at moving, and this is a big thing for me, because sometimes it's not easy to leave home, right? Home is where you're comfortable at, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
and as my profile was raising. I had some notoriety within certain circles, and so I'm moving to a place where I don't know anybody, and basically starting from scratch, but I'm bringing a little something with me. And so he said, well, let's do an event. And he told me, he says, let's do an event. And he said, you know what, we'll do an event together, and I won't charge you to do the event. And so he says, I won't charge you.
Amazing.
Yeah, and people pay him starting prices, 25
Mm-hmm.
grand, right?
Mm-hmm.
25 grand
Mm-hmm.
or better, right? And he said, I won't charge you, and you keep whatever you make at the door, and I'll just sell product, and whatever I make on my product. But he's like, that'll be my going away gift for you. And so that's how that whole event came together, man. That was his going away gift for me, and I can't thank him enough. And so
Yeah, that was a blessing. That was a blessing. Amazing. All of that. Oh my
yeah, yeah.
gosh.
So I'll say to people, man, don't worry about negative things, or failing or whatever. You need to just get out there and try. And the more you try, the more you get out there and put yourself out there, right, people will begin to gravitate to you. Your tribe will begin to gravitate to you, and you don't know
Exactly.
what doors it will begin to open. The Bible said, your gift will make room for you, and put you in front of great men and great people. And so
Yes, I concur. My mother always taught us growing up that nothing fails but a trial, and if you don't try, you'll
yeah,
never know. So I
exactly. Oh, it's
definitely
some wisdom.
agree. Yes.
That wisdom.
So my last thing for you, because I definitely want you to share with the people what you have going on, what's in the making, and what's been going on for a while now. But before, because in thinking of this, this big dream, your vision that you have for your project, how is it for you when, because we talked about people, having different ones around you
Hmm.
along the way of you trying to attain this goal or this dream. Were there people that you had to let go of?
Oh.
And this could be in your relationship, personal relationship, as well as business relationship.
Hmm.
What did that look like for you? Because I definitely know you have to be around people that are like minded. But what was that journey like for you with your project that you have coming up?
Well, I'll tell you, just anytime you begin to elevate in any situation, right? So, the project that we're working on is significant, but anytime you begin to elevate above your situation and elevate above the crowd, there's going to be a shift. There's going to be a shift, man, and there's going to be people who are used to and accustomed to you being the person that they're comfortable with. All right, and that's family, that's friends, and they can't handle the fact that you're elevating, right?
Hmm.
If you're getting to the point where you're reading motivational things and it's shifting your mindset into positive things, right? You're going to begin to want to be around people who elevate and operate on that level and who think on that level and who are trying to do the same thing. And everybody that's in your current circle, even in your family, are not going to necessarily understand that. And so you're going to have that, and you have to be fine with understanding that everybody can't go with you. Everybody isn't going to go with you. There are friends who I grew up with, and we're cool, right? We're cool because we've known each other for a long time. The conversation, when I have a conversation with them, is I'm not gaining anything out of it, right? And as a matter of fact,
Hmm.
is taking away from me, and it
Yeah.
becomes challenging, right? I got this one friend, we were childhood friends, and so when I have a phone call, I can only talk to him a couple times a year, just because when I do talk to him, just the conversation is just you know
Not
it's
the
tough.
same. It's
Yeah,
different.
it's tough because the stuff he wants to talk about is just is not productive, right? And what I'm always trying to do is put myself in circles with people who are higher than me, right? I'm trying to
Right,
surround
because you want to
myself.
learn.
Yeah, I want to surround myself with people who are high, who are who are above me, right? And so I can learn and gain expertise and gain wisdom and gain knowledge, right? And so to elevate myself. And so unfortunately, everybody can't go with you, and if you are committed to your goals and what it is that you want to achieve, then you understand that, and you make peace with that, and you just realize that everybody's not going to go to that level. And so through every stage of my growth and every stage of my life, I've had people that have fell off, and new people that have come in, and I always thank God, move the wrong people out and move the right
Yeah,
people in, move the
weed
wrong
them
people
out.
out and move the right people in. And it's just pruning. And I mean, it's just like when you just mentioned weed them out, right? It's just like a tree, right? You got to cut, or a bush, you got to cut back,
Hmm.
prune things and cut back so that they can expand and grow even more, right? And so that's just how it is.
I think that's key because you do find some people where they actually want to be the smartest, or like how we
Hmm.
say we want to be in rooms where we're able
Yeah,
to learn and pull from different ones that have
yeah.
more maybe, than us, but you have people that
No,
they want to be the
yeah.
hierarchy and look down on you type thing. Like I've
Hmm.
experienced that throughout
Hmm.
this
No, man.
entrepreneurial journey.
I'm always trying to learn more. I'm always trying to learn more, and really, even now, man, I'm on the spiritual side of things. I'm really trying to be around people that can help me grow spiritually. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, I'm just always trying to grow more and always trying to be around people who just are on a different level. And I can gain and learn more from them. So,
Definitely. And I like that you said spiritually because a lot of people ain't speaking nothing when it comes to spiritual intervention, divine intervention, giving credit and reverencing the one that made us. You get what I'm saying? Some people don't
yeah,
even have that mindset.
yeah,
But for me, at the end of the day, Jabari, like I feel that that's first and foremost. Whether you want to put it on the front end, the back end, whatever the case is, like this flesh that we are in, like it's an expiration date on it.
yeah,
Yes, we're
yeah.
gathering all of these tangible things, so that we can live comfortably. Like that's the goal, right? But at the end of the
Hmm.
day, when it's our expiration day, you can't take none of that with you. So it's like, what
Yeah,
are we putting in the mind? So I
yeah,
like that you trying to include some kind of spiritual something
yeah.
in what you're doing physically. You get what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
no, absolutely, absolutely, and I mean, the name of the company, and I was certainly trying to share, or just naturally sharing knowledge, but the name of our company is Rise, R and spell it RYSE. Recognizing the young, successful, and empowered. And it came about, I'll bring it back full circle. It came about because when I was in real estate, market was booming, making good money, and I had invested in small mom and pop businesses and had done well for myself, and I would be asked to speak to youth groups about overcoming obstacles and coming from Pine Hills, and we know
Yeah,
Pine Hills,
yeah,
Prime Hills,
yeah.
and Mercy Drive and the Palms Apartments, and coming from all of that, right, and overcoming all of that, and achieving success, and they would look at me, and I had a little less gray on my chin at the time, and I was a little more slim and a little more cut,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so they would relate to me a little more, a little bit, and because I was a young guy, and I was like, man, there's a lot of folks out here doing phenomenal things. What do there's a lot, and we see the athletes, we see the entertainers, but we don't see entrepreneurs or people that are building their own companies, and I was like, man, what are you talking about? And so I felt like it was important to begin telling those stories so that people can have something different to see and have something different to look up to. And so we started the company as a magazine. So we started as a magazine, but we would do these cover unveiling events. And so we would do these events that were well attended. And like you mentioned, you came to our cover unveiling, and the
Right.
whole crew, you all had the whole crew there, and phenomenal, wound up being a phenomenal event. And we did well in Orlando, and knew it was time to expand and grow to a larger market, and ultimately move the company to Atlanta, which is what led to the Les Brown event where he sent us off, and came to Atlanta. And then when I moved the company to Atlanta, bigger market, right? And so because it was a bigger market, it got me just looking at things, from a different lens. And
Right.
I said, man, what we were doing in Orlando was great, but we have to begin to expand upon what we're doing because it's a bigger market. So we just, we got to do it even bigger here. And so began working on this concept called Rise Creative Village. One thing about Atlanta is, we all know that Atlanta is a big entertainment market because, we know
Mm-hmm.
music. Music is big here, and what a lot of people don't know is that Atlanta is like the number three, or Georgia is the number three market in terms of video film production. So
Okay.
everything films here. So you got New York and L.A., and people know L.A. for filming, but most of the things that are now being greenlit in LA, they come over to Georgia and film it. And so you have a lot of production that's taking place here. And we know that nobody's more creative than black folks, right? We are some of
Mm-hmm.
the most creative people. And so, but we aren't the ones getting greenlit. We aren't the ones getting greenlit to tell the stories. And so we began, working on a concept because we are storytellers at Rise. And so we began working on this concept for building out a content production studio and development incubator for creatives that are in film, music, gaming, and digital media, immersive media. And so began working on this concept, which would be the evolution of Rise. And so And so that's what we began working on. Started this process in 2019. Wind up purchasing a former Atlanta public school property, which I would have
Okay.
never imagined. But can you imagine? We purchased an elementary school, so that had been closed for a number of years. So 31,000 square feet, sitting on
Wow.
5 acres of land. And
Wow.
so yeah, so we're now going through the construction process, and when it's all said and done, there's going to be production studios, there's going to be podcasting studios for people like yourself who are creating content, photography studios, esports gaming center, virtual sound stage, a cafe, a commercial shared kitchen. And so you just build out this community
Mm-hmm.
for emerging creatives. And we're partnered with institutions like Georgia Tech, and the project is funded by a black-owned bank. And so,
Wonderful.
yeah, so it's phenomenal. And on some additional land that I mentioned, we're going to be building an apartment complex in a later phase. And so we're talking 90 units with affordable housing. And so it becomes this mixed-use development, live, work, play. And so something greater than I could even fathom when I began this process. But it's really all about everything we talked about throughout this whole thing. Building community for people, connecting people with tools and resources for them to be successful, with people to mentor them and help them to be successful, and then connecting them with opportunities. So I like to say, curate, cultivate, and connect. And so that's what we're working on now, and so it's exciting.
I like it. Sound like a CCC to me.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for your time and sharing your story. And I know they got something from it. We're going to end with that. And you all listening, just make sure you try to surround yourself with positivity at the end of the day. And please like, share, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Thank you very much.